The wind clawed at the ancient stones of Dover Hall, its turrets looming like black sentinels against the ink-stained sky. In the echoing ballroom, chandeliers swayed as servants whispered of the vanished heiress, Lady Evelyn Ashcombe. Her velvet cloak lay discarded by the great oak doors, yet no footprints marked the frost beneath. Hercule Poirot, summoned from London at dawn, stood in silence. He raised one immaculate eyebrow. A lady does not simply vanish, mon ami. She is hidden. Or she hides. Chapter 1. The Summons. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the downs, a damp veil that blurred the edges of the English countryside. The train cut through it with a metallic rhythm, its wheels beating time like a stern metronome. Hercule Poirot, resplendent in his perfectly tailored grey suit, sat rigidly upright in his compartment, a figure of immaculate order amid the disorder of fog and steam. Before him on the fold-out table lay a telegram, creased but not rumpled. For even in agitation, Poirot permitted no untidiness. It bore the clipped hand of Inspector James Harcourt of Scotland Yard, a man Poirot had encountered on more than one occasion, usually in the aftermath of some scandal the Yard had wished to resolve with speed and discretion. This telegram had been urgent, abrupt, almost desperate. Heiress vanished, suspected foul play, Dover Hall. Immediate assistance requested. Poirot read the words for perhaps the 15th time, and allowed himself a thoughtful smile beneath his moustache. "The English police," he murmured. "They are like the child who has broken the toy and calls for the nurse to mend it. But this time, ah mon Dieu, there is something in the tone that tells me the toy is not merely broken. It is perhaps lost altogether." At his side, Captain Hastings shifted impatiently. He had been scanning the landscape with the restless eye of a man who finds confinement a trial. "I still don't see why they must drag you all the way to Dover, Poirot," he said. "If the girl has run off with a fellow, it's hardly a case for you." Poirot's green eyes glittered. "That, mon ami, is precisely why it is a case for me. For a young lady of wealth and standing—"
"Poirot!" he exclaimed, seizing the Belgian's hand in a hearty clasp. "Thank heavens you came! It's a dashed business. The Ashcombe name is one of the oldest in Kent, and if the papers get hold of it, well, the Yard will look a fool." Poirot inclined his head. "It is always the reputation, yes? It must be preserved, like a vase of Sèvres porcelain, even when the contents are spilling over the floor. Come, tell me everything." They drove through winding lanes that led away from the town and into the wild heart of the countryside. The land rose and fell in undulating waves, crowned here and there with the gnarled skeletons of wind-bent trees. Then, as the road curved, Dover Hall revealed itself. It was an edifice of sombre stone, half fortress, half manor, its towers clawing at the sky like the fingers of a giant hand. The windows were black hollows. The great door, when it opened to admit them, groaned as though resentful of intrusion. Hastings shivered involuntarily. Within, the atmosphere was no less oppressive. The air smelled faintly of old wood, coal smoke, and something else, something more elusive. Poirot sniffed delicately. "There is une tristesse here," he observed softly. "A sadness that is not of today, but of many years. It lingers like perfume." Harcourt led them into the drawing-room, where a group of anxious figures waited. Lord Henry Ashcombe, tall and lean, lounged near the fire, his aristocratic features marred by an expression of boredom that seemed a little too studied. Beside him, Dr. Malcolm Greaves, the family physician, rubbed his spectacles with nervous vigor. A young man of striking good looks, Julian Fairfax, as Harcourt whispered, paced the carpet like a caged lion, his hand twisting a signet ring upon his finger. And in a shadowed corner, a young woman in a plain dress, Clara Whitmore, Evelyn's maid, sat with downcast eyes and tightly clasped hands. Harcourt cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Monsieur Hercule Poirot, whom I have had the honor of calling in to assist us. Lord Henry's lip curled. A foreigner, is he? Well, if he can conjure my cousin out of thin air, I shall— Announcement. Evelyn's engagement to Julian Fairfax, a match of wealth and influence. On the evening in question, Evelyn had dined with her household and guests, excused herself early, and retired to her chamber. At midnight, her absence was discovered. The oak doors at the front of the hall stood ajar, and on the frost-laden ground outside lay her cloak, velvet and fur-lined, and a string of pearls broken upon the stone step. But no footprints marked the frost. No carriage had been seen departing. No servant had heard the gates open. She had vanished, as though the night itself had swallowed her. Hastings frowned. But that's impossible. Surely there must have been footprints if she went outside. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Just so, Hastings. If the footprints are not there, it is because she did not go outside. The pearls, the cloak, they are perhaps le petit théâtre, the little stage play. We must discover the audience it was meant to deceive. Julian's face darkened. You mean she staged it herself? That Evelyn would humiliate me, humiliate her family, on the very night of our announcement? Impossible! Poirot studied him with polite interest. Nothing, Monsieur Fairfax, is impossible. There are only degrees of improbability. He requested to see the cloak and pearls. A footman brought them on a silver tray, as though they were relics. Poirot examined the cloak, lifting it delicately between forefinger and thumb. He noted a faint tear near the hem, as though it had caught on something. Then he turned to the pearls, rolling them gently in his palm. At last he raised his eyebrows. These are not real. A murmur swept the room. Dr. Greaves adjusted his spectacles, frowning. Surely you must be mistaken. I have seen Lady Evelyn wear them often. Poirot shook his head. No, mon cher docteur. The nacre is too even, the weight too light. These are imitation pearls of the cheapest manufacture. A lady of wealth such as Lady Evelyn, she would not wear these on the night of her betrothal. Unless— Unless what? Demanded Hastings. Poirot smiled enigmatically. Unless she had a reason. Clara Whitman Ashcombe is not dead. She is not lost. She is hidden. And Hercule Poirot will find her. A silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Even Lord Henry's sardonic smile faltered. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face in turn, on the cousin's disdain, the doctor's nervousness, the fiancée's anger, the maid's fear. Each mask concealed something, he was certain. But which mask concealed the truth? At last he bowed slightly, as though before an unseen audience. And so, mes amis, the play begins. Chapter 2. The Household. The corridors of Dover Hall stretched long and solemn, lined with oil portraits of Ashcombe's past. Their painted eyes followed the visitor with an air of silent reproach, as though each ancestor disapproved of the scandal that had fallen upon the family name. Poirot, whose step was always deliberate, placed his patent leather shoes with the precision of a dancer, listening not only to the echoes, but to the silence that followed. For silence, he believed, spoke more eloquently than words. Inspector Harcourt, less attuned to atmosphere, bustled beside him with a kind of self-conscious importance. "The household is waiting in the morning room," he said. "I thought it best you meet them together before we conduct separate inquiries. The servants are half out of their wits, and as for the family, well, you'll see soon enough." Poirot inclined his head graciously. "It is well. One must view the tableau as a whole before examining the brushstrokes." The morning room, despite its name,
was a chamber of muted gloom, the heavy curtains drawn against the pale daylight. A fire burned in the grate, throwing shadows across the tapestry carpet. Around the room's perimeter were gathered the principal figures of the household, assembled like actors awaiting their cues. Lord Henry Ashcombe reclined in an armchair with practiced nonchalance, his long legs crossed, one hand idly stirring the contents of his brandy glass. His face was lean, aristocratic, but his eyes betrayed a sharpness that contradicted his languor. He rose only half-heartedly when Poirot entered, offering a nod that was courteous with beneath the surface.
She looked neither at Poirot nor at the others, her gaze fixed upon her clasped hands. Poirot took in each of them with a single sweeping glance, then bowed, with old-world courtesy. Messieurs, mademoiselle, permit me to intrude upon your sorrow. Hercule Poirot seeks only the truth, and with your assistance, it shall not remain hidden. Lord Henry gave a dry chuckle. If truth is what you're after, you've chosen the wrong house. Dover Hall has always thrived on secrets, not revelations. Poirot's moustache twitched. Secrets, my lord, are like the moths. They thrive in darkness. But bring them to the light and poof, they disintegrate. Julian Fairfax's voice cut in, sharp with irritation. Must we waste time with parables? The question is simple. Where is Evelyn? She is my fiancée, and every hour she remains missing increases the danger to her life. While you speak of moths, she may be suffering. Poirot turned his gaze upon him. Your devotion is admirable, monsieur. And yet devotion can be shown in many ways. Some speak with passion, others act with patience. We shall see which you are. Julian flushed, but made no reply. Harcourt cleared his throat. Poirot, perhaps we might begin with a statement from each member of the household. Their recollections of the night in question. Poirot nodded gravely. It is the essence of investigation. To hear, to compare, to discern. Let us begin. Lord Henry was first. He spoke in languid tones, as though the entire matter were tiresome. I retired early, before the announcement. I find such occasions tedious. So much champagne, so much false laughter. I neither saw Evelyn nor Fairfax after dinner. I slept heavily, and only learned of her disappearance at breakfast. That is all. Poirot studied him with serene interest. You did not see Lady Evelyn again after the dinner? No. And you have no opinion on what became of her? Lord Henry's lips curved in a sardonic smile. Opinions I have, shuffled forward, his hands trembling slightly. I was in my quarters most of the evening, writing letters. Lady Evelyn had consulted me earlier in the day regarding a persistent fatigue. Nothing serious, I believe, merely the strain of social obligations. I retired to bed around 10 and heard nothing unusual until the alarm was raised. Poirot leaned closer. This fatigue. Had Lady Evelyn been unwell? The doctor hesitated, then answered quickly, Not unwell precisely. A touch of nervous strain, perhaps. The young lady was, after all, under considerable pressure. Pressure of what kind? Greaves shifted uncomfortably. The impending engagement, I should imagine. Though she appeared willing enough, one never knows the heart of a woman. Poirot murmured, Indeed, one never knows. Did you prescribe her anything? A mild sedative, yes, harmless. She often found it difficult to sleep. Poirot thanked him and turned to Julian Fairfax. The young man's composure cracked as he spoke, his words spilling with vehemence. I last saw Evelyn in the library. She was pale, distracted. I begged her to confide in me, but she brushed me aside, saying she would speak tomorrow. Tomorrow!
and now she is gone. If you think she left of her own accord, you are mistaken. She would not dishonor me, nor herself. She is the victim of some abominable plot, and by God I'll find the scoundrel who took her." Poirot regarded him silently for a moment. "And at what hour did you last see her, monsieur?" "9:30. She said she wished to retire early." "You did not accompany her?" Julian's jaw tightened. "She insisted on solitude." Poirot's gaze flicked to the signet ring the man twisted upon his finger, then back to his face. "I thank you." At last Poirot turned to Clara Whitmore. She rose slowly, her face pale but composed. "I prepared Lady Evelyn's chamber, laid out her nightdress, and placed her pearls upon the dressing table as she asked. She seemed nervous, almost frightened, but she said nothing to me. After she retired, I remained in the antechamber, mending some linen. I heard no sound. At midnight I was summoned by the butler, who remained blank." He paused before the fire, gazing into the flames. "Lady Evelyn did not vanish by accident. Of that I am certain. She was anxious, distracted, fearful. Something weighed upon her mind. She wore imitation pearls instead of the real. Why? She left her cloak by the door. Why? These things, they are not accidents. They are signs." Lord Henry gave another sardonic smile. "And what do these signs tell you, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot turned, his eyes bright. "They tell me, my lord, that Lady Evelyn Ashcombe is still alive." The declaration fell into the room like a thunderclap. Julian sprang upright. "Alive? Then where is she?" Poirot raised a finger. "That, monsieur, is the question. But believe me, she is near. Perhaps nearer than any of you suspect." As he spoke, he caught a faint scent drifting on the air. A delicate fragrance, unmistakably feminine, lingering like a ghost. It was rosewater, the very perfume Lady Evelyn favored, and it seemed to come, not from the drawing room, but from the direction of the locked east wing. Poirot's mustache quivered. The little gray cells stirred. Somewhere within Dover Hall, a secret awaited discovery. The pearls. The morning light filtered reluctantly through the leaded windows of Dover Hall, casting long beams across the parquet floor of the library. The house, though ancient, seemed unsettled by the events of the previous night. Footsteps echoed louder than they should have. Voices fell to hushed whispers, and even the fire burned with a sullen reluctance. Poirot, ever sensitive to atmosphere, noted it all with the faintest narrowing of his eyes. It was here, amid the heavy scent of leather-bound volumes and the smoke of the hearth, that Poirot requested the pearls be brought to him once more. A footman arrived with the silver tray, on which lay the broken necklace. The pearls rolled slightly against the polished surface, pale orbs glinting faintly in the morning light. Poirot lifted them with great care, as though each bead were a living thing. He allowed them to run slowly through his fingers, their cool surfaces whispering against it. No, Lady Evelyn was not one to play. She was anxious, yes, distracted, perhaps, but to discard real pearls for false ones, there is design in it. Julian Fairfax, who had been pacing the room with restless energy, turned sharply. "What does it matter whether they were real or false? She is gone. That is what matters. Wasting time over trinkets will not bring her back." Poirot turned his gaze upon him, calm, almost pitying. "You are impatient, monsieur. Yet in crime, as in love, it is often the smallest detail that betrays the truth." Julian's lips tightened, but he said nothing more. Poirot bent once again over the pearls. He traced the broken string, noting the frayed end. "See here, Hastings. The thread is not snapped with violence. It has been cut,
A deliberate act, not an accident. Hastings bent closer. By Jove, you're right. But why would anyone cut them deliberately? Why, indeed? To suggest a struggle, perhaps. To create the illusion of flight. But the illusion is imperfect. The pearls are false, the cut deliberate. It is a stage set, mon ami, and Lady Evelyn, or someone else, was its playwright. As he spoke, his eyes drifted to the hearth. The fire crackled, its embers faintly glowing. Poirot, moving with sudden intent, knelt before it. With the aid of the poker, he sifted delicately through the ashes. A curl of charred paper caught his eye, still intact at the edge where the flames had not reached. He plucked it carefully with the tongs, laid it upon the tray beside the pearls, and smoothed it flat with the precision of a surgeon. It was a fragment of a letter, the ink blurred but legible in parts. Poirot read aloud, his voice soft yet distinct. "Meet me by the cliffs at midnight. J.F." A silence fell across the room. All eyes turned to Julian Fairfax. His face drained of color, then flushed crimson. "This is outrageous," he cried. "Anyone could have written those initials. They prove nothing." Poirot's expression did not change. "Perhaps. Yet it is curious, is it not, that the very initial accusations, but truth." He turned again to the fragment. The hand was elegant, firm, but only a few letters remained. Poirot studied them closely. "The ink is recent, the hand refined. But whether it is indeed the writing of Monsieur Fairfax, that we cannot yet say. We must obtain samples, n'est-ce pas?" Harcourt nodded grimly. "I'll have Fairfax's correspondence fetched at once." Julian's eyes blazed. "Do as you please. You will find nothing." Poirot said nothing, but his mustache twitched. The rest of the morning was spent in examination. Poirot requested access to Lady Evelyn's chamber, where he moved slowly, touching nothing, observing everything. The bed was neatly arranged, unslept in. The dressing table bore signs of recent use, a powder puff with traces of rouge, a crystal bottle of rosewater, a comb still tangled with strands of golden hair. Yet the wardrobe, curiously, was almost empty. Several dresses were missing. Poirot bent, inspecting the empty hangers. "It appears, Hastings, that Lady Evelyn did not vanish with only her cloak. She took garments with her. A disappearance prepared, not accidental. But if she planned to leave," Hastings objected, "why the pearls and cloak by the door? Why the note at the cliffs?" Poirot's eyes sparkled. "Exactly, mon ami. Why? A woman who prepares a wardrobe does not stage a violent flight, unless she wished to mislead. Unless she wished to suggest abduction, when in truth she had another design." At that moment, Clara Whitmore appeared in the doorway, pale and hesitant. "Monsieur Poirot, may I speak with you alone?" Poirot inclined his head and dismissed the others with a gesture. When the door closed, Clara twisted her hands together, her face drawn with anxiety. "Lady Evelyn," she whispered. "She was afraid." Poirot's gaze softened. "Afraid of what, mademoiselle?" Clara hesitated. "Of him." "Of whom?" She shook her head violently. "I cannot say. She swore me to secrecy, but she told me she would leave a sign, something to show she had not gone willingly. I think the pearls were her sign." Poirot leaned closer. "You are devoted to her, yes?" "Yes." Her eyes filled with tears.
Plays a dangerous game. But whether she plays alone, or with accomplices, that we shall discover." As he spoke, the wind rose outside, rattling the windows. From the distance came the faint, hollow cry of the sea beating against the cliffs. Poirot listened, his expression grave. "At midnight, by the cliffs," he repeated softly. "We must see what the night concealed." Chapter 4. The Cliffside. The air was raw with salt and damp when Poirot and Hastings made their way to the cliffs.
A pale sun hung low, its wan light scarcely piercing the gray shroud of cloud that stretched across the channel. The sea below heaved and crashed with a mournful cadence, its voice carrying up the chalk face like the lament of some ancient god. Dover Hall stood distant behind them, a brooding sentinel against the moors, its turrets peering faintly through the mist as though reluctant to release its secrets. Poirot paused often, lifting his polished boots high above the tufts of seagrass, his gaze searching the ground with meticulous attention. Hastings, ever impatient, strode ahead, stopping only when the path narrowed perilously close to the cliff's edge. "Careful, Poirot," he called. "These rocks are treacherous. One wrong step and you'd be dashed to pieces." Poirot raised his eyes and gave a small smile. "Life, mon ami, is always the walking of such paths. One misstep and poof, all is finished. But it is not the abyss that interests me. It is the footprints." Hastings frowned and peered at the frosted grass. Indeed, faint impressions were visible, 2 sets of them, side by side, leading toward the edge. The marks were blurred by salt spray, but distinct enough to suggest a meeting had taken place. "By Jove," Hastings muttered. "Looks as though Evelyn really did come here, and another with her." Poirot crouched, balancing on the balls of his feet, and examined the prints more closely. Yes, 2 sets. One lighter, more delicate, the foot of a woman. The other heavier, belonging to a man. They advanced together toward the brink, but observe. He pointed delicately with his cane. The woman's steps are shallow, hesitant, while the man's are firm, insistent. There is meaning.
Far below, the sea foamed against the rocks, relentless, merciless. From behind came the sound of a cough. Inspector Harcourt approached, his coat collar turned up against the wind. "You see, Poirot? Looks plain enough to me. She met someone here, and either slipped or was pushed. No mystery about it." Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. "You English policemen, always eager to close the book before you have read the final page. Tell me, if she was pushed, where is the body?" Harcourt scowled. "The tide, man. The channel sweeps many things away. Fishermen sometimes find the wreckage weeks later. Just so. And yet—" Poirot bent again, this time plucking something from between 2 rocks near the cliff's edge. He held it aloft in triumph. It was a glove, fine kid leather, embroidered at the wrist with the initials E.A. Hastings whistled. "Evelyn Ashcombe's, without a doubt." "Précisément," Poirot said. He turned it carefully in his hand. The glove was damp, smeared faintly with chalk dust, but otherwise intact. Dropped perhaps in a struggle, or placed here deliberately. Always we must ask, is it accident or theatre? Julian Fairfax, who had accompanied them, despite Harcourt's protests, now stepped forward. His face was haggard, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. When he saw the glove, he gave a strangled cry. "It's hers! My Evelyn's! She must have fallen. I told you, Poirot. Someone lured her here and forced her to the edge." Poirot regarded him calmly. "And who, monsieur, would lure her? You, perhaps?" Julian recoiled. "How dare you?" Poirot lifted the charred fragment of letter he had carried from the library. "The note says, 'Meet me by the cliffs at midnight, J.F.' Tell me, monsieur, do those not happen to be your initials?" Julian's voice rose, hoarse with anger. "A forgery! A vile trick to incriminate me!" "Perhaps." Poirot tucked the fragment away once more. "But forgery or truth, the fact remains. Lady Evelyn did not leap willingly. Of that I am convinced." They moved along the cliff's edge, the wind tearing at their coats, the sea booming below. Poirot dipped into a small hollow, half hidden from the path. Here the grass was trampled, and the earth showed signs of recent disturbance. Poirot examined it closely, running his cane across the soil. Someone dug here," he murmured, "but not deeply. Perhaps something was hidden, or retrieved." Harcourt grumbled. "You see shadows where there are none, Poirot. To me it looks like a tussle. She resisted, the fellow overpowered her, and, well, you see the rest. Poirot stood, dusting his hands. Perhaps, Inspector. But what I see is a plan. Intricate, deliberate. Nothing here is by chance. The pearls, the cloak, the glove. Each is a signpost, placed to point in a certain direction. The question is, who placed them, and why? The inspector muttered, but said no more. As they turned back toward Dover Hall, the clouds thickened, and the sea grew ever darker, its voice swelling to a roar. Poirot walked in silence, his brow furrowed, the glove clutched delicately in his hand. Hastings, observing him, dared at last to speak. "You believe she still lives, don't you?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Yes, Hastings. Lady Evelyn Ashcombe is not in the sea. She is hidden. And when a thing is hidden, it is because someone desires it so. The task of Hercule Poirot is to discover who and for what purpose." They reached the gates of Dover Hall as the first drops of rain began to fall. Inside, the household awaited, restless and suspicious. Lord Henry lounged with his customary cynicism. Dr. Greaves adjusted his spectacles nervously. Clara Whitmore kept her gaze fixed on the floor. All eyes turned to Poirot as he entered, the glove in hand. "Messieurs, mademoiselle," he announced, "we have been to the cliffs. We have seen the footprints, the signs of a meeting, the glove of Lady Evelyn herself. But do not be deceived. The theatre is well staged, but the drama is false. Lady Evelyn is not beneath the waves. She is here." Perhaps.
Chapter 5. The Locked Wing. The storm had risen with startling swiftness. By late afternoon, the wind battered Dover Hall with furious fists, rattling its windows and shrieking down its chimneys like some vengeful spirit. The rain lashed at the stone walls, and the house, already steeped in unease, seemed to shudder under the onslaught. Poirot, standing near the tall staircase, tilted his head and listened. The storm, he thought, was a fitting accompaniment to the drama unfolding within. He had asked discreet questions, made polite inquiries, and at last, from the lips of a hesitant servant, Poirot had heard whispers of a place, an abandoned wing of the house, long sealed, long ignored. Few ventured there, doors locked, corridors gathering dust, a history of tragedy attached to its name. Lady Evelyn, it was said, had always avoided that quarter of the hall. Yet more than one servant had remarked in recent weeks on seeing a light flicker there at night. So it was that Poirot, with Hastings at his side and Inspector Harcourt grudgingly in tow, approached the heavy oak door at the end of the east corridor. The air here was colder, carrying a faint scent of mildew and neglect. Dust lay thick on the floor, disturbed only by the occasional scurrying of a mouse. The door itself bore an iron lock, its keyhole dark and forbidding. "By Jove," Hastings whispered, "it looks positively medieval." Poirot raised an eyebrow, as indeed it may be. "These old English houses, mon ami, they are full of secrets. Sometimes they keep them well, sometimes not at all." Harcourt harumphed. "This is nonsense. There's nothing here but disused rooms. You're chasing shadows." "Perhaps," Poirot replied softly. "But shadows, Inspector, have a habit of leading to the light." From his pocket, he produced a small, gleaming object, a set of lockpicks, delicate as a jeweler's tools. Hastings stared. "Good heavens, Poirot! Where did you learn such a thing?" Poirot's mustache twitched with amusement.
In Belgium, my friend, we do not rely entirely on policemen to open doors for us. Within moments, precision of a surgeon, pausing often to examine some trivial detail, the angle of a chair, the crack in a window pane, a trail of disturbed dust. At last, they came to a chamber larger than the rest. The door was shut fast, and upon it was carved the crest of the Ashcombe family, a lion rampant, its claws raised. Poirot pressed his ear to the panel, listening intently. After a long moment, he nodded and opened the door. The lantern's glow fell upon a room of startling preservation. Here, unlike the others, dust was thinner, the air less stale. Curtains hung intact, though faded. A great bed stood in the center, its canopy heavy with velvet. On the mantelpiece stood a mirror, its glass still clear, reflecting their faces with ghostly pallor. Hastings drew in a breath. This room, why, it looks almost lived in. Precisely, Poirot said quietly. Someone has been here, not long ago. Harcourt scowled. Ridiculous. A servant, perhaps, or some idle curiosity. Poirot moved to the bed. He bent low, examining the counterpane. See here, Hastings, the faint impression of a body, not deep but recent. And there, on the floor, footprints, small, light, the prints of a woman's shoe. Hastings' eyes widened. Evelyn? Poirot raised a finger. Perhaps, or another, but the presence is clear. A woman has lain here, within the last day. He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room. On the writing desk lay a quill, ink fresh in its well. A sheet of paper bore the faint imprint of words, though the page itself had been removed. Poirot bent, tilting the paper to the light, and smiled faintly. Someone has written a letter here and torn it away, but they leave behind the ghost of their words. From his pocket, he drew a small magnifying glass and examined the indents. Slowly, he traced the letters aloud. Cannot trust them. Danger. Tonight. The rest was too faint to read. Hastings, but Harcourt seized his arm. Careful, man, it could be dangerous. Poirot inclined his head. Dangerous, yes, but necessary. He stepped forward, lantern held high, and the others followed. The passage was narrow, forcing them to proceed single file. The walls were of rough stone, the ceiling low. Their footsteps echoed hollowly as they descended. At intervals, niches appeared in the walls, some containing rusted candlesticks, others empty but for dust. At length, they emerged into a small underground chamber. Here the lantern revealed the remnants of occupation. A stool, a blanket, a tin plate with crumbs still upon it. Hastings gasped. Someone has been living here! Oui, Poirot said softly. He stooped, lifting the plate. Recently, perhaps even last night. On the floor lay another object, a book, its pages worn, its cover bearing the initials E.A. Poirot lifted it reverently. It was a volume of poetry, marked with Lady Evelyn's hand. A pressed flower lay between the pages, its petals dry and fragile. It is hers, Poirot murmured. She has been here. Harcourt swore under his breath. But why, for heaven's sake? Why hide in these tunnels when she had the run of the house? That, Inspector, Poirot replied gravely, is the heart of our mystery. Lady Evelyn did not vanish. She concealed herself. The question is, from whom, and for what purpose? The thunder boomed above them, shaking the stones. Poirot straightened, his face set. "Come, messieurs, we must return. There is more yet to discover, but not tonight. Tonight, the storm hides too much." They retraced their steps, closing the panel behind them. As they emerged once more into the grand hall, the storm raged without mercy, rattling the windows and moaning in the chimneys. The household awaited, anxious, restless, eyes turning always to Poirot. He said nothing, but in his gaze burned the certainty of revelation yet to come. And deep within the locked wing of Dover Hall, the secrets of Lady Evelyn Ashcombe lay waiting, half revealed, half concealed.
Treasures, truth, for example. And perhaps murder.
Hastings groaned. "You think Evelyn is dead, then?"
Poirot dabbed his moustache. "I think, Hastings, that Lady Evelyn Ashcombe was in great peril, peril of which her physician, Dr. Greaves, knows more than he admits."
Hastings blinked. "Greaves? But he's a family friend. A dull fellow, cautious, respectable. Surely not capable of—" Poirot raised a finger.
"One must beware the dull men, Hastings. The world suspects the fiery temper, the violent hand. But it is the quiet doctor, the steady lawyer, who conceals the greater danger. They know too well the frailty of the human heart."
As if summoned by these words, Dr. Greaves entered the dining room. His spectacles gleamed in the lamplight, and his damp coat clung to his thin frame. He nodded curtly, as though acknowledging a tribunal rather than a breakfast. "Good morning," he muttered. Poirot beamed at him.
"Ah, doctor, you come at the perfect moment. Hastings and I were speaking of you."
Greaves stiffened. "Indeed?"
We admired your diligence. It is no small thing to be the guardian of a lady's health. Tell me, how was Lady Evelyn's condition these last weeks?"
Greaves busied himself with coffee. "Much the same as always. A delicate constitution, nerves unsettled. Nothing unusual." Poirot's eyes narrowed.
"And yet, doctor, she disappears in the night. Her pearls cut, her glove abandoned, a secret room concealed. Do you still call this nothing unusual?"
Greaves shifted, his hand trembling slightly as he lifted the cup. "I am not a detective, Monsieur Poirot. I deal with illness, not disappearances." Poirot leaned forward.
"But illness, doctor, can be the very root of disappearance. You, more than any, knew her fears, her secrets. Was she afraid?"
The doctor's gaze flickered, then hardened. She was troubled, yes. She spoke of shadows, of being watched. I told her it was her imagination.
"Did you believe so?"
Greaves hesitated. "No."
Before Hastings could speak, Poirot, unruffled, adjusted his cuffs. "You see, Hastings, the guilty man does not argue. He flees."
"But what can he be guilty of?" Hastings demanded. "You don't think Greaves harmed her?"
"Not with his own hands, perhaps. But knowledge can kill, Hastings. A doctor holds in his keeping the power of life and death. Lady Evelyn trusted him. He betrayed that trust, or fears that he did."
Later that morning, Poirot requested access to Greaves's bag, left unattended in the study. Harcourt protested, but Poirot reminded him of the urgency of the case. With Hastings watching nervously, Poirot opened the leather satchel. Inside lay the usual instruments: stethoscope, thermometer, scalpels, bottles of powders and tonics. But among them was a small packet sealed with wax, bearing Lady Evelyn's name. Poirot held it delicately. "Her prescription," Hastings guessed. Poirot broke the seal. Inside was a vial of tablets, white and unmarked, and a folded paper containing notes in Greaves's precise hand. Poirot read them slowly, his brow furrowing. For Lady Evelyn Ashcombe. To be taken nightly for calm. Should symptoms persist, increase dosage. Observe for dizziness, fainting, loss of memory. Hastings whistled. Good heavens! He was dosing her into oblivion. Poirot closed the vial. Not poison, but perilous. In careless hands, such drugs can weaken the body, cloud the mind. A convenient tool, n'est-ce pas? A lady who speaks of danger may be dismissed as delirious. A lady who disappears may be explained as unstable. He replaced the packet carefully. We must speak with Greaves again, but not yet. First, let us consult Lady Evelyn's maid. Clara Whitmore received them in her small chamber under the eaves. Her eyes were red from weeping, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Poirot sat opposite her, his gaze kind but insistent. Mademoiselle, you served Lady Evelyn faithfully. You saw her daily. Tell me, did she take the medicines the doctor prescribed?
Poirot said gravely. But first, I must unravel the threads, and one thread leads always to Dr. Greaves.
That evening, Poirot confronted the physician in the library. Greaves stood by the fire, his face haggard, his hands clasped behind his back. You know why I am here, Poirot began. Greaves did not look at him. You think me a villain. You are wrong. Then prove it, Poirot said softly. Tell me the truth. At length the doctor sighed, his shoulders sagging. Very well. Lady Evelyn was ill. Not with hysteria, not with nerves. With her heart. A weakness inherited from her mother. I prescribed sedatives to calm her, yes, but also to spare her from strain. She was fragile. A shock might kill her. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet you did not tell her family. They would have treated her as an invalid, confined her, ruined her chance of happiness. She begged me to keep her secret. I agreed. Perhaps I was wrong. But I swore to protect her. Poirot studied him intently. And did you? Did you protect her, or hasten her peril? Greaves met his gaze with haunted eyes. I do not know. That is the torment. Poirot said nothing for a long moment. At last he murmured, Merci, doctor. You have given me the peace I required. As he left the library, Poirot's mind was already racing. A weak heart, secret medicines, a hidden refuge, and a staged disappearance. The game was growing clearer. Lady Evelyn's illness was real, but around it, someone had woven a net of deception. And Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, would soon untangle it. Chapter 7. The Cousin's Gambit. The storm had broken by morning, leaving Dover Hall shrouded in a damp stillness. The rain had ceased, but the sky remained a dull pewter, heavy with the aftertaste of thunder. Within, the great house was restless. Servants whispered in corners, doors opened and shut with furtive haste, and the lingering unease of Lady Evelyn's disappearance clung to every tap.
Missing. Henry flicked ash delicately into the tray. My dear Captain Hastings, oddness is my chief amusement. In a house where everyone wrings their hands and sighs tragically, someone must provide a note of irony, or we should all expire of boredom. Poirot studied him with narrowed eyes. You mask your feelings with wit, monsieur, but behind the mask there is truth. Tell me, what is that truth? Henry regarded him with a half-smile. You see too much, Poirot. Very well. The truth? Evelyn was beautiful, charming, and foolish. She inherited wealth and squandered none of it, which was more than could be said for me. She feared shadows,
trusted the wrong people. And now, poof, she is gone. What more is there? Perhaps, Poirot murmured, that you stand to inherit a portion of her fortune, should she remain gone. For the first time, Henry's smile faltered. A shadow passed across his face, quickly concealed. So that is the angle, is it? The greedy cousin lurking in the background, waiting for death to deliver riches. I should congratulate you, Poirot, on choosing the oldest motive in the book. Because, monsieur, Poirot said gently, the oldest motives are often the truest. Henry stubbed out his cigarette with unnecessary force. Yes, I have debts. I wagered more than was wise, and London is full of creditors eager for my blood. But murder? No, Poirot. I may be reckless, but I am not monstrous. Poirot leaned forward. Then tell me, milord, where were you on the night of Lady Evelyn's disappearance? Henry shrugged. In my chambers, drinking brandy and losing a game of patience. Alone, alas, so I cannot provide the alibi you seek. Convenient, Hastings muttered. Henry chuckled. Convenient, perhaps, but true. You see, detective, my life is not nearly as dramatic as you hope. Poirot tapped his fingertips together. And yet you knew of the locked wing, did you not? Henry's eyes widened briefly before narrowing once more. What of it? Poirot's moustache twitched, fell harshly on his features, revealing the strain beneath his cultivated poise. You twist everything, Poirot. Yes, I knew she was troubled. Yes, I saw her walk the corridors at night, restless, like a ghost. But I did not follow her into that cursed wing. I am not her jailer. Poirot rose also, his gaze unyielding. But you might be her heir. Henry spun, his eyes flashing. Do you think I am so base that I would watch her vanish into shadows and hope never to see her again? Evelyn and I may not have been close, but she was the only Ashcombe with a shred of grace. Without her, Dover Hall is nothing but stone and dust. Do you not see? I would lose as much as I gained. Hastings blinked. Lose? How so? Henry laughed bitterly. Because creditors cannot be paid with estates alone, Captain. They demand coin. Evelyn's presence drew investment, guests, influence. Without her, Dover Hall is a carcass, and I, its crow. Poirot studied him with renewed interest. So your gambit, milord, was not to profit from her death, but to cling to her life. You required her, not her inheritance. Henry's expression softened, and for the first time, sincerity glimmered in his eyes. Yes. I mocked her fears because they frightened me. If Evelyn fell, I should fall with her. That is my truth, Poirot. Make of it what you will. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. Poirot's gaze drifted to Henry's hand, which trembled faintly as he lit another cigarette. It was not the hand of a cold-blooded killer, but of a man ensnared by his own ruin. Poirot inclined his head. Merci, milord. You have told me much. Henry exhaled smoke, his eyes shadowed. And what now? Do you march me to the gallows? Poirot's smile was faint. Non, but beware, milord. The truth, the chimneys once more. And within Dover Hall, the shadow of Lady Evelyn loomed ever larger, whether ghost, prisoner, or corpse, none yet could say.
But Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, was closer than ever to unveiling the gambit that held her fate. The Maid's Confession. The house was quieter than usual that morning, subdued in a way that pressed on the nerves like a too-tight band. The air smelled of extinguished fires and damp stone, and even the portraits in the gallery seemed to regard one another with unease. Poirot walked slowly, hands clasped neatly behind his back, his polished shoes tapping rhythmically against the flagstones. Hastings followed, already weary of the oppressive silence. "Poirot," he murmured, "I cannot help feeling the house itself conspires to keep Evelyn hidden. Every corridor echoes like a vault. Every door creaks as if it resents being opened. The whole place is cursed." Poirot's moustache quivered. "Mon cher Hastings, houses do not conspire. People do. But the house, ah yes, it reflects their fears. Dover Hall is like a mirror. It shows us the cracks in the souls of those who live here. And one soul, I think, knows far more than she admits." Hastings frowned. "You mean Clara?" "Just so. The maid has the eyes of a child who has seen a ghost, and the silence of one who fears to speak. Today, Hastings, we shall draw forth her confession." They found Clara in the servants' hall, her apron rumpled, her hands nervously wringing a cloth that bore no stain. She started at their approach, her pale face betraying sleeplessness. Poirot smiled warmly, seating himself opposite her with the patience of a confessor. "Mademoiselle Whitmore," he began softly, "you are a loyal maid, that is clear. You loved your mistress." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I did. She was kind to me, kinder than the others. She treated me as if I mattered." "Bien sûr," Poirot murmured. "Such loyalty deserves truth. And yet, mademoiselle, you have not spoken it. You hide something." With delicate fingers. Inside was a folded sheet of thick paper, inked in Lady Evelyn's elegant hand. Hastings leaned close as Poirot read aloud. "If you are reading this, it means I am lost. I have lived under watch, though none will believe me. Dr. Greaves calls me nervous, Henry mocks me, and Philip grows cold. But I know the truth. I am pursued. I do not know by whom, only that eyes follow me, steps echo mine, and shadows lengthen when I walk. I fear poison in my glass, a hand at my throat. If I disappear, do not think it my weakness. It is their strength. And if I die, know this. I loved once, and was betrayed." Poirot folded the letter carefully, his expression grave. Clara's tears ran unchecked. "She was so afraid. I tried to comfort her, but she would not let me tell anyone. She said they would call her mad. And then she began hiding in the old wing. She said it was the only place the eyes could not reach her." "Did she ever tell you?" Poirot asked gently. "Who betrayed her?" Clara shook her head. "No, only that it was someone close, someone she ought to trust. She said their smile was false, their touch cold. She said they wanted her gone." Hastings muttered, "Good Lord, that could be any of them." Poirot ignored him, his eyes fixed on Clara. "Tell me, mademoiselle, what did she ask of you?" Clara hesitated, then whispered, "She made me promise to fetch letters from the village. They were left for her at the post office under another name. She read them in secret. I never saw what they said." "Letters?" Poirot's brows rose. "From whom?" "She never told me." Poirot tapped his chin. "And when she vanished, did you notice anything unusual?" Clara's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Yes. Her jewel box was gone. And her diary." "Her diary?" Poirot leaned forward eagerly.
Describe it. A little red leather book, locked with a clasp. She kept it under her pillow. I think it held all her thoughts. If we could find it. Clara broke off.
Objected.
Why not confide in her family? Why trust only her maid? Poirot smiled faintly. Because, Hastings, she suspected the family. And perhaps rightly so. Consider, Dr. Greaves dulls her with sedatives. Lord Henry mocks her. Mr. Ashcombe grows cold. Whom could she trust? Only the maid who loved her without interest. Hastings rubbed his chin. You think one of them plotted her death? Poirot's eyes gleamed. I think one of them had much to gain. But which? Ah, patience. The diary is key. Find that, and we unlock the heart of the mystery. That afternoon, Poirot requested to examine Lady Evelyn's chambers once more. Hastings assisted, though somewhat half-heartedly, as Poirot conducted a meticulous search. Drawers were opened, gowns lifted, cushions pressed, and carpets smoothed. At last, behind a loose panel in the wardrobe, Poirot discovered a narrow gap. Sliding his hand within, he drew forth a small object wrapped in silk. It was the diary. Poirot's eyes lit with triumph as he examined the red leather cover, the clasp still fastened. Producing a tiny instrument from his pocket, he deftly opened the lock. Within lay page upon page of Evelyn's delicate script. He read swiftly, his expression darkening. Hastings waited impatiently until Poirot closed the book with a snap. Well? Poirot's voice was grave. It is as I feared. She wrote of letters from a man she once trusted, a man who professed love, but whom she believed sought her fortune. She never named him, but she described his voice, his habits, his words. And Hastings. Poirot paused, his moustache twitching. These descriptions could fit more than one in this house. Hastings groaned. Dash it all, Poirot, that makes it worse. Poirot placed the diary carefully on the table. No, mon ami, it makes it better. For now we know her disappearance was no whim. It was the culmination of fear, of betrayal, of a trap closing about her. And her betrayer walks still within these walls. As evening descended, Dover Hall seemed more oppressive than ever. But in the flickering candlelight, Poirot's eyes shone with certainty. He had this at all. To sit here, baiting a trap like hunters, it's unsporting, and devilishly unsafe besides. Poirot adjusted a candle so its flame cast long, wavering shadows. Nonsense, Hastings. It is the oldest method in the chase. One lays a morsel, and the rat comes forth. Tonight, the rat of Dover Hall will reveal himself, or herself. Hastings stopped pacing. But suppose you're wrong. Suppose Evelyn truly ran away. Poirot's mustache bristled. Mon ami, Lady Evelyn did not run. She was driven. Her diary speaks of betrayal. Her maid's confession speaks of fear. And now I have set the stage for the betrayer to act again. Watch closely, Hastings. We shall see courage and cowardice play side by side. Upon the table lay the objects of temptation, Evelyn's diary, the letter Clara had kept hidden, and a folded note in Poirot's own hand announcing that by dawn the truth of Lady Evelyn's disappearance would be made public. Poirot had arranged matters so that the household believed the evidence would be revealed in this very room at sunrise. All who fear exposure, he murmured, will not wait for dawn. They will come to silence the evidence, and in so doing, they shall betray themselves. The great clock struck 1. The house seemed to hold its breath. Hastings sank into a chair, his nerves taut. Poirot remained motionless, eyes fixed on the door. At last, faint footsteps sounded in the corridor, hesitant, pausing, then advancing again. The latch turned, and the door opened. A figure slipped inside, cloaked in shadow,
moving stealthily toward the table. Poirot raised a hand, signaling Hastings to silence. The intruder approached, bent over the diary, and reached out a trembling hand. "Bonsoir, docteur," Poirot said softly. Dr. Greaves froze. His face, pale in the candlelight, reflected shock and guilt. The diary trembled in his grasp. I came only to protect her memory," he stammered. Poirot rose. "Protect, doctor? By destroying the words she wrote in her own hand? No. You came... Perhaps she did escape."
Poirot studied him intently. For all the doctor's trembling, there was a ring of truth in his desperation. The little grey cells ticked quietly. Greaves was guilty, yes, but guilty of cowardice and concealment, not of murder. He had played a part, but not the final act. Before Poirot could speak, another sound pierced the silence, the faint creak of a second door, the servant's entrance at the far side of the room. Poirot whirled, and there stood Lord Henry, his hand half raised as if to snatch the diary himself. For a moment, the two men, doctor and cousin, stared at one another, each pale with exposure. Henry recovered first, his sardonic smile returning like a mask hastily donned. "Well," he said lightly, "it seems I am not the only night wanderer. Tell me, Poirot, do you always conduct séances with trembling physicians?" Poirot's gaze was cold. "And you, my lord, what brings you to this room at such an hour? To admire the candlesticks? Or to suppress a truth that may ruin you?" Henry's eyes glittered. "Perhaps both. I heard whispers of evidence, so naturally I wished to see it. Curiosity, nothing more." Greaves sprang up. "Liar! You wanted it destroyed!" Henry sneered. "And you did not. Do not play the righteous martyr, doctor. You are as complicit as any." The room crackled with tension, the two men accusing, defending, circling like wolves. Poirot raised his hand. "Silence! Each of you reveals himself by the eagerness to cast blame. Yet neither of you speaks the one word I seek. Evelyn, where is she? Who holds her?" The silence that followed was thick as fog. Neither spoke. Neither knew. Poirot saw it in their eyes, the ignorance as genuine as their guilt of lesser sins. Hastings whispered urgently, "Poirot, what does this mean? Both of them wanted the diary, yet neither has her." Poirot's moustache bristled. "It means, mon ami, that the betrayer is still at large. That tonight's performance has revealed two players, but not the author of the play."
Locking them in a small case he placed under his arm. "Come, Hastings. The play is not yet finished. Tomorrow, I shall force the curtain to rise." As they ascended the stair, the house groaned around them, ancient wood protesting with each step. Hastings glanced nervously behind. "Poirot," he whispered, "what if the figure we saw? What if it was Evelyn herself?" Poirot paused on the landing, his eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "If it was, mon ami, then she hides from more than shadows. She hides from truth, and the truth, like midnight, cannot be evaded forever." Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. Morning broke over Dover Hall with a pallid light, the sea below restless, the cliffs shrouded in mist. Servants moved anxiously, whispering that Monsieur Poirot had summoned the family and closest confidants to the great hall at 11 o'clock. No one knew what to expect, but all knew that the small Belgian detective did nothing without reason. The long chamber, with its carved beams and ancestral portraits, had seen feasts, funerals, and scandals. Now, it would host judgment. The Ashcombe family gathered, Harcourt stiff with dignity, his knuckles white upon his cane. Philip Ashcombe, pale and sullen, his fiancée Gertrude by his side. Lord Henry, lounging with studied nonchalance, a cigarette trembling faintly between his fingers. Dr. Greaves, hollow-eyed, as if he had not slept. Clara the maid, wringing her hands, reluctant, yet compelled. Poirot stood at the head of the table, immaculate in grey, his moustache waxed to perfection. Beside him, Hastings looked rather like a nervous juror awaiting sentence. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice calm yet carrying to every corner. We are gathered because Lady Evelyn Ashcombe has vanished. Some believed she fled, some feared she died. But I tell you, neither is precisely true. She has been betrayed, and tonight I reveal the betrayer. A murmur rippled through the room. Poirot raised a hand, and silence fell. Let us begin at the beginning. Lady Evelyn was troubled.
Quarrelled. A letter lies upon my table, unsigned, but full of reproach. A farewell. Did you write it? Perhaps. But it was not you who drove her to despair. You were cold, but not murderous. Philip flushed scarlet. He began, then subsided, shamed into silence. Poirot's eyes swept the room. The maid Clara loved her mistress, served her loyally, kept her secrets. She feared the wrath of others, yet she alone preserved the letter that speaks the truth. She is no villain. Clara wept silently. Hastings offered her a handkerchief. And so, Poirot said softly, we come to the heart. Lady Evelyn wrote in her diary of betrayal, of love once given, turned false, of letters received, of promises broken. Who was this man? Not the doctor, too cautious, not the cousin, too flippant, not the fiancé, too dull. No, it was another, one who stood near, who heard her fears, who soothed her, who whispered devotion while plotting gain. Poirot's eyes fixed on Harcourt Ashcombe, the patriarch. Gasps sounded. Even Hastings started. Harcourt's cane struck the floor. This is absurd, he thundered. I am her uncle. Precisely, Poirot replied. The guardian of her fortune, the master of Dover Hall. Evelyn trusted you, mon cher monsieur. You advised her. You comforted her. And when she confided her fears, you told her she was safe. But you knew otherwise. You, who arranged the accounts, who knew the debts, who feared ruin as much as Henry. Yes, you had the greatest motive of all. With Evelyn gone, the estate returned to your control. With her silenced, no marriage, no transfer of fortune could deprive you of power. Harcourt's face blanched, then flushed crimson. Lies! She was hysterical. Poirot raised a finger. No, monsieur, not hysterical. Her diary speaks of a voice, low, commanding, paternal, of hands that rested on hers, reassuring, yet cold. Who else fits such a description? Who else possessed
would be lost. I did it for the family, for the name. Poirot's moustache stiffened with disdain. For yourself, monsieur. Do not clothe greed in loyalty. You betrayed her trust, her love, her youth. And now you will answer for it. At that moment a sound echoed through the hall, the slow opening of a door at the far end. All turned, and there she stood, Lady Evelyn Ashcombe. She was pale, thin, her eyes shadowed by fear and confinement, but unmistakably alive. Clara cried out and rushed to her, but Evelyn raised a trembling hand. I heard everything, she whispered. At last, the truth. Her gaze fell on Harcourt. Uncle, why? I loved you. I would have forgiven much. But you made me a prisoner. Harcourt bowed his head,
Unable to meet her eyes, Poirot stepped forward, his voice gentle.
Mademoiselle, you are safe now. The shadows are gone. Justice will be done.
Evelyn swayed, and Clara caught her, leading her to a chair. Hastings, overcome, muttered, "By Jove, Poirot, you've done it again." Poirot smiled faintly.
It is not magic, Hastings. It is order, logic, the little grey cells. When one clears away the lies, only the truth remains.
The police, summoned by Poirot earlier, arrived to take Harcourt into custody. He went without struggle, broken by the exposure. The family sat stunned, unable to reconcile the stern patriarch with the villain unmasked before them. Poirot gathered his hat and gloves.
My work is finished. Lady Evelyn will recover, Dover Hall will endure, and perhaps, the sea will carry away the last whispers of betrayal.
As he and Hastings stepped into the morning air, the mist lifted briefly, revealing the sun breaking through the clouds. The storm had passed. Hastings sighed with relief. Well, Poirot, another case concluded. But I must confess, I never suspected the uncle. Poirot's eyes twinkled. That, mon ami, is why you are the chronicler and I the detective. You look at the waves, but I see the tide. And the tide, Hastings, always reveals what the waves